If you're going to be a villain in a horror movie, you need to make sure that from the beginning, you make your entrance and make it count. I mean, I like to think every time I walk into a room, people turn around and be like, ooh, he's clearly a villain. Wait, actually, maybe that's why I don't have any friends. With increasing confusion, I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are the 10 greatest villain introductions in horror movie history. Number 10, John Kramer, Jigsaw's bathroom reveal. There is no movie twist that can compare to the slow dawning rise of John Kramer from the bathroom floor in the very first Saw movie. Having been lying prone as a corpse for the entire run of the film, with red herrings and suspicious characters all being accused of being the Jigsaw villain, the final reveal of the mastermind himself is a memorable shocker for both a stunned Adam and the viewers at home. Played perfectly in time to the strings of the iconic Hello Zepp theme tune, which would later go on to be the franchise's standout track, John's slow and graceful rise from the bloody floor made for a brilliantly apt introduction to this legendary character. Number 9, Freddy Krueger, A Nightmare on Elm Street. If you tell me that the extending knife-fingered arms of Freddy Krueger didn't keep you up at night, you're lying to me. In this twisted and terrifying dream sequence, a confused Tina Gray faces an unknown man in a dark, foggy alleyway as she struggles to separate her dream from reality. As the man begins to approach, both the viewer and Tina see more and more of his appearance, from his burnt, scarred face to his strangely bunchy arms. Then the music builds and the shadows change, and those bunchy arms begin to stretch out further and further and further along the walls of the alley. With sharpened knives attached to his fingers, a cackling laugh echoing down the street, and a staggering, lumbering walk, Freddy Krueger has appeared in his most terrifying form. In a fantastic, well-constructed scene arranged by horror master Wes Craven, we see the frightened Tina turn to prayer for help, only for Freddy to hold up his knife glove and reply, "This is God," before making his advance. The perfect way to introduce such a vengeful, powerful, and cold-hearted character. Number 8, Bruce, Jaws. With his eerie underwater presence felt from the very first scene of Steven Spielberg's masterpiece Jaws, the great white is unmistakably terrifying. As a young teenage Chrissy heads to the ocean for an alcohol-induced dip, the sudden swap to the shark's POV lets the audience know in a second exactly what we're in for. The heavy warning beats of the Jaws theme kick in, and the tension-filled scene builds until Bruce finally finds his target. With absolutely none of the shark in view, he makes his first brutal attack and drags a screaming Chrissy by the legs into the deep black depths of the water. From the film that made an entire generation of viewers terrified of the sea, Bruce is a standout killer, and his unforgettable theme tune from John Williams makes his introduction truly one of the best. Number 7, Pennywise, It 2017. Hiya, Georgie! The wonderfully mean-spirited opening to It Chapter 1 is a scary, savage, and seriously messed up introduction for one of cinema's most bizarre and frightening villains, Pennywise the Clown, played here by a magnetic Bill Skarsgård. As innocent little Georgie loses his paper boat down a drain, an eerie voice leers at him from beneath the road, and two big round eyes peer up at him from inside the pipe. Even with half of his face cast in shadow, Pennywise is still utterly terrifying in this scene as he lures Georgie closer and closer with simpering tones and an unsettlingly toothy smile. As every parent watches in terror, Pennywise makes his move and bites Georgie's arm clean off before dragging the child straight into the murky drain for his first kill. A horror villain reborn from shadows and grease paint alike, Pennywise's entrance perfectly sets the tone of the film and sets his character up to be one of the most unlikable and horrifying characters of the genre. Number 6, Samara The Ring. If you were a horror fan in the early 2000s, you'll understand why Samara ranks so highly on this list. In this hauntingly inspired concept, The Ring shares the story of a videotape designed to kill anyone who watches it within 7 days, murdered by the entity shown on the tape, known as Samara. Samara's pale form is sinister and horrifying as she makes her first appearance in the film, using bony fingers and lank face-covering hair to crawl her way out of a grainy blue-lit well on screen. The slow tension builds as we see more and more of her appear, before she moves horrifyingly over towards the screen, before eventually reaching through the glass to climb out into the real world. A truly terrifying scene and a great introduction to a classic horror villain. Number 5, Michael Myers, Halloween. Those simple piano keys will never sound the same again. The memorable and lilting score from the opening scene of John Carpenter's Halloween is the perfect soundtrack to the introduction of the legendary horror villain, Michael Myers. Zooming in first-person perspective through an elegant 50s-style home, the camera becomes the attacker in this gruesome first kill of Halloween, with a young teen, Judith Myers, getting stabbed to death in her own bedroom. The brutal sequence is punctuated by one of the all-time great horror reveals, revealing that the culprit whose perspective we were sharing was actually a young boy, Judith's brother, Michael. In a shocking twist that encapsulates Halloween's themes of evil right from the start, cementing Carpenter's film as one of the genre's finest in the process. Number 4. Gabriel Malignant. In Malignant's secrecy-loaded and dream-heavy plotline, Madison Lake Mitchell suffers through a series of mysterious and vicious killings around her, both of her abusive husband and of various doctors and scientists around the state. Though hints are dropped throughout this emotionally driven plot that Madison herself is to blame for these deaths, the final twist is devastating and unsettling. Her once conjoined parasitic twin Gabriel, a living tumour sealed inside her head, is instead the horror villain of the film, revealed in a jarring old home movie of his starved body reaching out from within her back. The rotation of the camera to reveal the insect-like form that is Gabriel, and the distressing knowledge that he's been living inside Madison since birth, as a parasite, is terrifying. Despite being little more than a sentient tumour, Gabriel's incredible strength, malicious kinetic power, and violent nature make him one of the most disturbing horror villains on this list. Number 3. Ghostface, Scream, 1996. Who can forget the opening scene of the original Scream? Many of us die-hard horror fans will know each line of this iconic scene by heart, with the memorable sinister telephone call being referenced and parodied multiple times since Scream was released. With a young Drew Barrymore answering the gruff, leering voice on the end of the phone as she potters around her empty house, this scary movie-themed convo is silly and goofy at first, with Barrymore's naive portrayal keeping the scene fun. But then suddenly the questions get more invasive, until eventually the caller reveals that he's looking at Barrymore's character while she's on the phone. With that one question, the entire scene changes. The imposing score builds, the terror increases, and at the end of the long, tense scene, we see Ghostface himself emerge to chase Casey to her death. What an entrance. Number 2. The Tethered Us. The second of Jordan Peele's incredible horror contributions, Us follows a symbolic and weighted storyline of a happy family being stalked and attacked by the tethered versions of themselves. While the first act of the film is predominantly filmed with warm family moments, a little marital strain, and some great comedic acting from the cast, the mood changes entirely when youngest son Jason announces that there's a family on their driveway. This simple line is the starting gun that sets off the entire second and third acts of the film, so heavily weighed down in intonation and meaning that it makes the strange visitors even more impactful as they approach. The first shot of the shadowy group holding hands together is powerful and dangerous, filled with tension and suspense, with a brilliant score that intensifies as the doppelgangers finally break into the house and show their cloned faces for the very first time. The tethered family are creepy, violent, dangerous, and confused on so many levels, and their underlit introduction embeds them perfectly into the plot. Number 1. The Entity. It Follows. Perhaps one of the most unsettling facts about the entity from It Follows is the ever-changing appearance of the being itself. It's so hard to identify just who the killer is, as it takes on so many forms and figures. But after the infection is passed on to heroine Jay, the first glimpse we get of the terrifying deadly entity is a simple walking old woman heading for the classroom. As the camera pans neatly around the room, the old woman outside is passed over and dismissed by both Jay and the audience before she simply begins to walk across the campus. She doesn't speak, she doesn't run, she doesn't scream, she simply walks, in perhaps the most ominous and chilling entrance from any of the villains on this list. But her intensity, her steadfast direction, and the sheer unstoppable force of her is what makes this villainous introduction so unnerving, as she relentlessly pursues Jay through the school in this memorable and terrifying screen. Now, you'll have to forgive me if I check over my shoulder for the next week and a half, but what did you think of the entries on this list? If there's anything you reckon that should definitely be included, let us know, because we will happily make a second list on this. Don't forget to go and follow us over on Twitter at WhatCultureHorror. You can follow myself at Sean Ferrick on Twitter as well. Look after yourselves until I'm talking to you again, and, you know, if you see old people, not saying avoid them, I'm also not saying don't avoid them. Thanks very much.